welcome to SKC Sapna Kohli classes. Today we'll do lesson number 5 from the book First Flight. The name of the lesson is The 100 Dresses Part 1 by Elbazor Esther. The story is a sensitive account of how a poor young girl is judged by her classmates. Vanda Petronsky is a young Polish girl who goes to school with other American children in an American town. These other children see Vanda as different in many ways. Let's read the lesson. Today, Monday, Vanda Petronsky was not in her seat. But nobody, not even Peggy and Madeline, the girls who started all the fun, noticed her absence. It was Monday, but Vanda Petronsky was not in her seat. Even Peggy and Madeline, her classmates, who usually made fun of her, did not notice her absence. Usually, Vanda sat in the seat next to the last seat in the last row in room 13. Usually, Vanda sat in the last seat in the last row of room 13. She sat in the corner of the room where the rough boys who did not make good marks sat. She sat in the corner of the room where the rough boys, the boys who did not score well in the exams, sat. The corner of the room where where there was most scuffling of feet. Scuffling of feet means noisy, dragging movements of the feet on the ground. The corner of the room where there was most scuffling of feet, most roars of laughter when anything funny was said, and most mud and dirt on the floor. So Vanda sat in the last corner of the room where the rough boys who did not score well in the exam sat. These boys made a lot of noise by the scuffling of feet. Scuffling of feet means dragging movement of their feet, laughed the loudest at anything funny, and brought a lot of dust and mud with their shoes. Vanda did not sit there because she was rough and noisy. On the contrary, she was very quiet and rarely said anything at all. So Vanda did not sit in the corner, in the last corner, because she was noisy, she used to make a lot of noise, she was talkative, or she was not good in studies. Instead, she was very quiet. She was very reserved by nature and rarely, hardly said anything at all. And nobody had ever heard her laugh out loud, and nobody had heard her laughing. Sometimes she twisted her mouth into a crooked sort of smile, but that was all. Now, twisted her mouth into crooked sort of smile. It means smiled in an unpleasant way. Sometimes Vanda used to smile in an unpleasant way. That was all. Otherwise, no one had ever heard her laughing loudly. Nobody knew exactly why Vanda sat in that seat unless it was because she came all the way from Boggins Heights and her feet were usually caked. Caked means covered with dry mud. So Vanda was neither noisy nor she was rough nor she was bad in studies, then why she chose to sit in that seat? The reason why Vanda decided to sit at that place was probably because she came from Boggins Heights. Boggins Heights is the name of a locality. So she came from Boggins Heights, an area where poor people lived, and her feet were usually caked, covered with dry mud. But no one really thought much about Vanda Petronsky once she sat in the corner of the room. Nobody really bothered about Vanda once she occupied her seat in the room. The time when they thought about Vanda was outside of school hours at noon time, when they were coming back to school, or in the morning early before school began, when groups of two or three or even more would be talking and laughing on their way to the schoolyard. So the only time when a few girls thought about Vanda was after the school hours at noontime or early in the morning before the school began, standing in groups of two, three, or even more. Sometimes these girls waited for Vanda to have the fun with her. So these girls, they waited for Vanda to have the fun with her. Now, what is the meaning of this expression? To have fun with her. It means to make fun of her or to make Vanda an object of ridicule. So sometimes these girls waited for Vanda to have fun with her or to ridicule her. The next day, Tuesday, Vanda was not in school either, and nobody noticed her absence again. The next day, that is Tuesday, on Tuesday too, Vanda was absent, but nobody noticed her absence again. But on Wednesday, Peggy and Maddie, who sat down front with other children who got good marks and who didn't track here means walk, in a whole lot of mud, did notice that Vanda wasn't there. On Wednesday, Vanda's absence was noticed by Peggy and Maddie. Peggy and Maddie got good grades in exams and did not carry mud into the class and occupied the front seats. Peggy was the most popular girl in the school. Popular means famous. Peggy was the most popular or famous girl in the school. She was pretty. She had many pretty clothes and her hair was curly. So, Peggy was beautiful. She wore pretty or elegant clothes or dresses and her hair was curly. Maddie was her closest friend. Maddie was Peggy's best friend. The reason Peggy and Maddie noticed Vanda's absence was because Vanda had made them late to school. So Peggy and Maddie noticed Vanda's absence when they got late to school. They had waited and waited for Vanda to have some fun with her, and she just hadn't come. Both Maddie and Peggy, as always, had waited for Vanda to have some fun by mocking at her, but she didn't turn up for school that day, and that is why both of them got late. They often waited for Vanda Petronsky to have fun with her. Now, let us discuss oral comprehension check questions. The first question is, where in the classroom does Vanda sit and why? So the answer is, Vanda usually sat in a corner of the last seat in the last row of room 13. And why? She sat there because her feet were covered with mud. Where does Vanda live? Vanda lives at Boggins Height, which is an unclean and poor locality. What kind of a place do you think it is? So it is an unclean and poor locality. The streets here are muddy, as Vanda's feet used to be covered with mud when she reached the school. Third question, when and why do Peggy and Maddie notice Vanda's absence? Peggy and Maddie noticed Vanda's absence when they got late for school. As always, they had waited for Vanda to have some fun with her by mocking at her, but she didn't turn up for school that day. What do you think to have fun with her means? It means to ridicule and mock her, to make fun of somebody. Now let's continue with the lesson. Vanda Petronsky. Most of the children in room 13 didn't have names like that. They had names easy to say like Thomas, Smith, or Ellen. So Vanda Petronsky was an unfamiliar name. Most of the children in room 13 had simple names like Thomas, Smith, or Ellen. There was one boy named Bouncy, Willie Bouncy, and people thought that was funny, that Willie Bouncy was a funny name, but not funny in the same way that Petronsky was. But Vanda Petronsky's name was complicated and it seemed funny and difficult. Vanda didn't have any friends. She came to school alone and went home alone. So Vanda was a Polish girl, while the other girls in the class, they were all Americans, right? She came to school alone and went home alone. She always wore a faded blue dress that didn't hang right. That didn't hang right means that was ill-fitting, did not fit properly. So Vanda was always dressed up in a faded blue dress which was ill-fitting. It was clean, but it looked as though it had never been ironed properly. So her dress was clean, but not properly ironed. She didn't have any friends, but a lot of girls talked to her. Sometimes they surrounded her in the schoolyard as she stood watching the little girls play hopscotch on the worn hard ground. Now, what is hopscotch? Hopscotch is a game in which children hop, jump into and over squares marked on the worn hard ground. Worn means much used up. So Vanda did not have any friends. She came to school alone and she went home alone. She was always dressed in a faded blue dress which was clean but not ironed properly, right? And she did not, so sometimes the girls of her class would gather around her as she stood watching the little girls play hopscotch. Vanda, Peggy would say in a most courteous manner. Now, here, courteous manner. The word meaning of courteous is polite. So Vanda, Peggy would say in a most courteous manner, as though she were talking to Miss Mason. Now, Miss Mason was the teacher of room 13. So here, the meaning of this line is that Peggy would address Vanda in a courteous manner. So here, courteous manner means she used to address Vanda in a mockingly courteous manner. And then she would say, Vanda, she would say, giving one of her friends a nudge. Nudge means a gentle push with elbow, giving a gentle nudge to one of her friends. How many dresses did you say you had hanging up in your closet? Closet means cupboard or almirah. So, in a mockingly courteous manner, Peggy would ask Vanda how many dresses she had in her closet or almirah, or you can say wardrobe. 100, Vanda would say. Vanda would reply that she had 100 dresses. 100! Exclaimed all the little girls incredulously. Incredulously means showing unwillingness to believe, or in simple language, you can say with disbelief. It was very difficult for the other girls to believe that Vanda had 100 dresses, and the little ones and these little girls, they would stop playing hopscotch and listen to Vanda. Yeah, 100, all lined up, said Vanda. Then her thin lips drew together in silence. So Vanda would say that it was true that she had 100 dresses all lined up in her cupboard, and after that she used to be silent. What are they like? All silk, I bet, said Peggy. So it was unbelievable for the girls that Vanda possessed 100 dresses. Then the girls talked to Vanda about the colors and material of her dresses. What are they like? All silk, I bet, said Peggy. Yeah, all silk, all colors. Velvet too? So do you have velvet dresses too? Yeah, velvet too. 100 dresses, Vanda would repeat stolidly. Now, what is the meaning of the word stolidly? Not showing any feeling or emotions. So the girls talked to Vanda about the color and material of her dresses, and Vanda answered all their queries. She would say that she had silk and velvet dresses of all colors. Then they would let her go, and then, before she had gone very far, they couldn't help bursting into shrieks and peals of laughter. Shrieks and peals of laughter means a long, loud sound, especially of laughter. And then they would let Vanda go, and before she had gone far away, these girls, they used to start laughing loudly. 100 dresses? Obviously, the only dress Vanda had was the blue one she wore every day. So the girls, it was very difficult for the girls to believe that Vanda had 100 dresses, because she was dressed up in the same faded blue dress every day. So why did she say she had 100? She had 100. What a story! So uh, since Vanda was always dressed up in the same blue dress, these girls wondered why Vanda used to tell a lie that she had 100 dresses. Then the girls would ask her, how many shoes did you say you had? 60 pairs, all lined up in my closet. So the girls would also ask Vanda how many shoes she had. Vanda would then say 60 pairs, all lined up in her closet. Cries of exaggerated politeness greeted this, all alike. And after Vanda used to reply 60 dresses. So cries of exaggerated. Exaggerate means larger than reality, right? Exaggerated politeness. So again, in a mockingly courteous manner, they used to ask her, all alike, all the 60 pairs of shoes are alike? Oh no, every pair is different. All colors, all lined up. So Vanda used to say that she had 60 pairs of shoes and that every pair was different. Peggy, who had thought up this game, and Maddie, her inseparable friend. So here, inseparable means which you whom you cannot separate. So somebody who's very close to you, right? Closest, best. Peggy, who had thought up this game. So it was Peggy who had started this game, right? And Maddie, her inseparable friend, were always the last to leave. So all the girls, you would have a hearty laugh after Vanda would walk away. And Peggy, who had started this game, and Maddie, her close friend, made maximum fun of her and were the last to leave. Finally, Vanda would move up the street, her eyes dull and her mouth closed, hitching her left shoulder every now and then in the funny way she had finishing the walk to school. So finally, Vanda would go away from there, her eyes dull. Dull means lacking in excitement, dull eyes, and her mouth closed, hitching her left shoulder. Now, the meaning of this word hitching means moving her left shoulder every now and then in the funny way she had finishing the walk to school alone. So, Vanda, she would walk away with her eyes dull and her mouth closed, moving her left shoulder every now and then in a funny manner towards the school. Peggy was not really cruel. She protected small children from bullies. So, the way Peggy used to tease Vanda about her dresses shows that she was very harsh. But actually, Peggy was not cruel, right? She, she protected small children from bullies. So, the silly game to humiliate Vanda was started by Peggy. But Peggy was not really cruel or hard hearted. She protected small children from bullies. Bullies are those who use their strength or power to frighten weaker people. So she used to save small children from those who used to frighten them, scare them. And she cried for hours if she saw an animal mistreated. This girl Peggy, she had a tender heart, she had a soft heart, and she would weep bitterly when she saw an animal being treated cruelly. If anybody had said to her, don't you think that is a cruel way to treat Vanda? She would have been very surprised. Cruel? Why did the girl say she had 100 dresses? Anybody could tell that that was a lie. Why did she want to lie? So, whenever anybody asked her that why she that it was wrong on her part to humiliate Vanda like that, she would say that she did not consider teasing Vanda as a cruel act. Actually, Peggy did not like anyone telling a lie. And she knew that Vanda was lying about her 100 dresses or 60 pair of shoes. Right? Why did she want to lie? So she believed that Vanda was telling a lie, and she wasn't just an ordinary person. Else, why did she have a name like that? Moreover, Vanda was just an ordinary person, which was suggested by her name. Anyway, they never made her cry. So, in her self defense, Peggy would say that Vanda was a liar and they had never made her cry. As for Maddie, this business of asking Vanda every day how many dresses and how many hats and how many this and that she had was bothering her. Bothering her here means troubling her. So, however, Maddie was very upset at this game of asking Vanda about her dresses, hats, this and that. She was really very, very upset. So, why was she upset? Maddie was poor herself because she was herself poor. She usually wore somebody's hand me down clothes. Hand me down clothes means old clothes handed down by someone. Old clothes or clothes which are second, we can say second hand clothes or clothes which have been discarded by others. So she usually wore somebody's hand me down clothes. Thank goodness she didn't live up on Boggins Heights or have a funny name. So you can be asked a question. What are the similarities or difference between Vanda and Maddie? So like Vanda, Maddie was poor, right? She used to wear old clothes or hand-me-down clothes, but she did not live up in a poor locality like Vanda, right? And she did not have a funny name like Vanda, right? So this is the difference. So Maddie felt lucky that she did not live in a place like Boggins Height, and she did not have a funny name like Vanda. Sometimes when Peggy was asking Vanda those questions in that mocking, polite voice, Maddie felt embarrassed. Embarrassed means ashamed, right? Mocking. Mocking means meant to make fun of someone. So sometimes when Peggy was teasing Vanda, Maddie would feel very embarrassed and uneasy and studied the marbles in the palm of her hand, rolling them around and saying nothing herself. Not that she felt sorry for Vanda exactly. She behaved, she felt unpleasant, she felt uneasy, she felt embarrassed, not because she had her sympathies for Vanda. She would never have paid any attention to Vanda if Peggy hadn't invented the dresses game. Right. It was so she would have never bothered about Vanda also if Peggy had not started that dress game with her. But suppose Peggy and all the others started in on her next. She wasn't as poor as Vanda, perhaps, but she was poor. Of course, she would have more sense than to say she had 100 dresses. Still, she would not like for them to begin on her. She wished Peggy would stop teasing Vanda Petronsky. Now, what is the meaning of these lines? So, sometimes when Peggy was teasing Vanda, Maddie would feel embarrassed and uneasy, and she would pretend to study the marbles in the palm of her hand, rolling them around and saying nothing. She became so uncomfortable that she wished Peggy should stop teasing Vanda. Now, why she wished Peggy to stop teasing Vanda? See, she was herself poor like Vanda, and she wore old clothes. She was afraid that she might become the new target of Peggy and other girls' mockery. So this was the reason why she wished Peggy would stop teasing Vanda Petronsky. Now let us discuss oral comprehension check. The first question is, in what way was Vanda different from the other children? The answer is, Vanda was a Polish girl. She was quiet or reserved by nature. She did not have any friends. She had an unfamiliar name which was difficult to pronounce. Did Vanda have 100 dresses? No, she didn't have 100 dresses. She was always dressed up in a faded blue dress. Why do you think she said she did? So right now, from the lesson, the part of the lesson that we have read, you can make a guess that Vanda knew that the girls were teasing her. So in order to silence them all, she said that she had 100 dresses. Why is Maddie embarrassed by the question Peggy asks Vanda? Is she also like Vanda or is she different? So Maddie is Peggy's close friend. She does not like Peggy asking Vanda questions about her dresses and shoes. She too is poor, but not as poor as Vanda. She is afraid that she may become the next target of mockery by her friends. That's all for part 1 of this lesson. The remaining part of the lesson we will be doing in part 2 of the video. I hope you have understood this much, and please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.